The San Francisco 49ers have a pretty special individual in QB1 Brock Purdy. No one's surprised by that. Well, maybe some people are. I'm not surprised by it. And what he did last weekend, without Deebo Samuel, without Christian McCaffrey, without George Kittle, was the stuff of legends. Well, guess what? It's about to get better. The 49ers are about to get more dangerous after new injury updates today. I can't wait to get into with you in a second here. We're going to get into that. Plus, we got other injury updates. We have Brock Purdy apologetics. We have controversy, all sorts of stuff that happened today in the news. I'm looking forward to talking to you about. But if you're new here, I'm Nate. Love talking the 49ers. Please consider a like and sub. I do genuinely really appreciate that. It does help me out. Brock Purdy's stats are absolute standouts again. It's just happening season after season now. It's game after game. And now we're 3 weeks into the season, and you're starting to get enough data to start, it's still early days, but, considering how the 49ers have played as a whole and considering the number of injuries they've had, these stats say a lot, in my opinion. They say a lot about what Brock Purdy's been able to do, and with the cast and crew around him. Now, we have to get to the injury update, the most important one being that George Kittle, not only was he out there, but it's shaping up like he's going to be playing this weekend. So that's a good sign. Knock on wood. I'm feeling really good about that. But his stats, these standout stats, doing this without the run and pass catching threat of Christian McCaffrey, doing it without the route and separation in zone schemes of Deebo Samuel, without the yards after catch of Deebo Samuel, doing it without George Kittle, both in the blocking for the run game, but also out there in pass catching, in consistency, in comfort in the pocket. My goodness, Brock Purdy hasn't had a whole lot of that. Lots of folks like to do those lazy Brock Purdy analyses, right? The same thing, he's the check down guy. He can't throw the deep ball. He doesn't have the arm talent, right? Surely, he doesn't have the arm talent. He's a first read guy. You name it. Well, here's another Brock Purdy apologist argument for you that came out in the data today. I got a couple pieces of data that came out today that's absolutely fantastic. This is maybe my favorite tweet I've seen in weeks. This is fantastic. There goes that Brock Purdy just dinking and dunking his way down the field with his cast of Avengers. I mean, just a loaded and fantastic statement there. But here's his deep target catch rate. So this is 12 plus air yard targets, okay? He's coming in at almost 35, 12 plus air yard targets through 3 games and is sitting at 70% catch rate. That's pretty wild. Like, can you believe that? That's pretty incredible. And some data to back that up in addition, right? Just to continue to just pile on the positive energy. One metric that debunks another false narrative. Thank you, Kyle Posey, for this one. A chart showing Brock Purdy's far from a first-read quarterback. Brock Purdy is second in the league in passing yards, trailing Dak Prescott by 9 yards, despite having 27 fewer passing attempts. Purdy is also second in yards per attempt, first in completion percentage over expectation, which would be higher as it's a stat that doesn't account for drops, and fourth in EPA per dropback. A couple of things to consider about Brock Purdy's start to the season that make it impressive. For one, he's been without the reigning Offensive Player of the Year and 2 All-Pros, but he's also been under considerable pressure. The 8th highest rate in the NFL, more than most of the quarterbacks in the upper echelon of statistical categories. Now, here's that chart, that different chart that shows how often 2024 quarterbacks have thrown to their first read and their EPA on those plays. So if you zoom in a little bit, percentage of throws that are first read, Brock Purdy, way down here in the lower percentage compared to everybody else. So percentage of throws on first read, and then that first read EPA being on the higher side for Brock Purdy was great. But just notice how far back he is back here. I don't know even how people, like, when people say he's a first read only guy, he just throws to his first, like, I don't even know who they're talking about. Clearly they're talking about Trevor Lawrence. because they're not watching Brock Purdy if they're saying that. I mean, just a dumb argument if you ask me. But listen, this is a great end to the article from Kyle Posey here. If the Niners have an explosive play, it's likely due to Purdy either using his legs to extend the play or his eyes to move a defender out of a throwing window. To me, the tweet above suggests that Purdy fully understands what routes are being run, and when he does go to his first read, as you can see, the result is overwhelmingly positive. So when he does hit his first read, he's on the higher percentage of hitting those guys, which is good. Just a few more out there. This one, Kevin Kruger. Brock Purdy is second in the NFL in tight window percentage at 23.2%. This is percentage of throws that a targeted receiver has less than 1 yard of separation. I think you've probably come across this stat a couple times at this point. But yeah, it's kind of a weird one when you think of, yards of separation, how they rate that, all that good stuff. But it is interesting. And Brock Purdy is the only quarterback within the top 10 of tight window percentage that has a completion percentage over 70%. So among those quarterbacks, he's the best. This one was pretty wild to me. I can't believe this here. Josh Allen and Brock Purdy pressure stats. Blitzed Brock Purdy 34 times. Josh Allen, 11 times. Hurried 14 times Brock Purdy, 3 times Josh Allen. Pressures, Brock Purdy, 31. Josh Allen, 6. Pressure percentage, 22% compared to 7.2% completed air yards. Brock Purdy, 625 yards, and Josh Allen, 243. Do you know how much I heard about Josh Allen's masterclass last weekend? How many times I heard people talk about how amazing he was? Like, why are we not talking about Brock Purdy? You guys are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy. This is crazy. Speaking of crazy, from Mike Silver about what Mike Shanahan said about Brock Purdy from the beginning. Listen to this.
Headquarters referred to as the Shanacam, which basically means Mike Shanahan needs to watch meetings and practice ASAP virtually.
That's awesome.
So some people think he's the shadow GM. I spent a bunch of time with him in May and June of 2022. And so in those conversations, I would ask about Trey Lance, of course, and Jimmy, and he kept talking about Brock Purdy because he'd seen some minicamp tape. And I was like, God, he's kind of weirdly into Brock Purdy, but, whatever. He's the 262nd pick. Now they open against the Bears. It's Trey Lance's first game as the unquestioned starter. The day before, I go to Mike Shanahan's room, and I'm sitting up there, and I'm asking him about Trey Lance, and he again brings up Purdy, and he says, when you have a guy like that in your building, you don't let him out. And I'm like, are we talking about, thinking,
yeah.
And, so he's still got it.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying, like, how is he not, like, Brock Purdy is a guy who it took him going to a Super Bowl for everyone to be like, okay, maybe he's actually really good.
Yeah.
And Mike Shanahan, before he even takes a snap in the NFL, is like, this guy is going to be good.
Pardon my take. Fantastic story from Mike Silver there. Really cool. Thursday's practice is a pretty good indication of how a chance will go on Sunday. Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, George Kittle, D. Winters all participated today. So a good sign heading toward the game. I don't think Deebo's going to play, unfortunately. I think he's going to be out one more week. I do think that Trent Williams, George Kittle are playing, and D. Winters, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I would love to see him out there, but because of this ankle injury, and it's been niggling and just kind of coming back, and he's been dealing with it for a really long time, I'm concerned that, with this weekend, they're going to be like, we're not taking the risk. And I do believe we need the help at the linebacker position. We need a little bit of support there. But we'll keep going forward. So controversy came out today. This article talking about Christian McCaffrey receiving some bad news after his recent trip to Germany, and then David Lombardi kind of combating that and saying that this report does not say McCaffrey received bad news. This headline's completely inaccurate, and then kind of going off on it. There's been no CMC update, and accounts are fabricating them out of thin air. Can't stress how important it is for people to actually do some reading instead of just relying on tweets. And then after Kyle Shanahan's interview today, we got a little bit of an update, which is this. Kyle Shanahan on Christian McCaffrey will probably tune it up here turn it up here in the next couple of weeks. We'll start testing it out here sooner rather than later. So that obviously means that they're going to take some risk in getting Christian McCaffrey out there and trying some routes and see what happens. And there's a concern there. There's a risk. But, none of this goes without Christian McCaffrey, I'm sure, wants to be on the field. And as much as Kyle Shanahan's job is to make sure all the guys are healthy and, he wants to make sure we do what's best for the team, I get it. Like, you got to try it out at some point. You got to put him out there. And one other piece of controversy that, I'll throw out there. We're only 10 minutes in, so we have time to cover this real quick. This is what Steve Young said about Brandon Aiyuk today on KNBR. A little bit controversial. I'm interested in your guys' take on this.
Brandon has got to answer, right? And I think that, like Nick said, Brandon needs to look it in the eye. Like, I'm sure there's things, maybe the plays haven't been called for him as much. Maybe there's some things, odd things that happen on certain downs where he wasn't the primary when they thought he would be. Maybe there's just some, but in the end, the full measure of what's happened, Brandon needs to own it. Like, I've come back, I missed the camp, and now it's not happening. So I have to take that on myself. There's no blame other than yourself. Own it. It's me. I'll go fix it. And if he does that, then I don't need to worry about Juwan, because it'll all take care of itself as they put more pressure on defenses. As Jordan continues to run so well, it's like defenses capitulate when they're under pressure and they keep play after play after play. It's like, frick, give me a break. Defenses want to break, and we don't want to give them. We're great at not giving breaks, and so that's where it's not. I don't worry about people now answering Juwan like, oh, can he do it again? Like, I just worry that Brandon's not leaning in to pressuring those defenses, and he has to. We've got to have that. And then I think even with our depletion, the guys that are now across the in Germany running around trying to get healthy, we can still thrive because we have the people. And I think that's why we talked last week. You said Brandon Aiyuk, I'm worried about him, and I think we all still remain concerned that we're not seeing a full measure of what he can do. So we got to get that going.
And I respect that take. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. You can't hold everything on Brandon Aiyuk when he's going out there and doing his part and getting separation, and his stats are great on that in that particular regard. You can't really fault him in that way. Where you can fault him is you can say if there's not a great connection between Brandon Aiyuk and Brock Purdy, you can put that on Brandon for voluntarily, remember that, voluntarily missing training camp. When he has dropped passes, you can put that on him because he's voluntarily missing training camp and he's rusty. What you can't do, though, is it's not 100% fair. Not 100%. It's somewhat fair, but it's not 100% fair to come at Brandon Aiyuk's, mentality and how he's approaching it. I mean, he's not out there dogging Brock Purdy and saying he's not throwing me the ball like we've seen wide receivers do in the NFL. Yeah, he could take more ownership in interviews, but he's kind of a weird interview guy. He's not Fred Warner. He's not going to tell it to you from a leadership perspective and how the team is processing what we're doing here. I mean, he's kind of a weird interview guy. So I don't know. It's an interesting take. I definitely think there's an element of responsibility. I would love to see him take responsibility. I think Brandon Aiyuk's version of take responsibility is what he did when he kind of said, I probably took it too far this offseason. Like that's him taking a leap toward responsibility. Does he need to go out there and produce? Absolutely. But he's also in a dependent position. And so what he needs to do is not drop the ball. He needs to catch the ball when it's thrown to him. He needs to keep running his routes. He needs to keep opening up lanes for other guys too. He needs to go out there, needs to block. And yes, we would all like to see Brandon Aiyuk return to that swagger that he had on the football field where he looked powerful when he ran his routes. He looked powerful when he caught the ball. He looked like when he caught the ball, something was about to happen after he caught the ball, right? So yeah, that'll come though. I do believe that will come. I think it's going to be all right. If you look at the apologist that Brock Purdy is for Ronnie Bell, think about how he must be behind the scenes with Brandon Aiyuk. I'm sure I'm sure he's supporting Brandon Aiyuk and wants Brandon on his side, wants them to have a good relationship. I think it's going to be fine. I really do think it's going to be fine. And I know that it's going to take time until there's a big game and when Brandon Aiyuk just goes off and gets over 100 yards and gets a couple TDs and just looks powerful. Looks, like the Brandon Aiyuk we've come to appreciate over the last season especially. When that happens, everyone will feel a lot better. I don't know when that's going to happen. Hopefully soon. This is another good opportunity right here. Teams now know. If they ever didn't know, now they definitely know they can't sleep on Juwan Jennings. They can't sleep on him. The other thing, the game a lot of times goes through the middle, and Juwan Jennings is often in that running those kinds of routes, But if Brandon Aiyuk gets hit with that ball over the top that Brock Purdy missed, I'm not going to bother arguing why he missed it or whatever. There's some interesting theories out there. But if Brock Purdy hits that ball to Brandon Aiyuk over the top and Brandon Aiyuk runs that in for a touchdown, it's got to be at least 40, 50, 60 yards. Like, that was a huge play. That would have been a huge, massive play. We probably feel a little bit different right now talking about Brandon Aiyuk. We're probably feeling different about it, Because he went out there and he got a touchdown and that would have put him like close to 100 yards, if not over 100 yards easily, right? Like, so, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. Big game against the Patriots. Every game feels like a must win in the NFL, but this one feels really important after that loss to the Rams. I thought the Rams game was really important. Bounce back, get things right going forward. And that was not what we wanted to see. So, yeah, 49ers are going out there and they're going to have a lot to prove. And I'm sure they're feeling that pressure in a good way. And hopefully they go out there and do improve and do a fantastic job. I'm still optimistic. I'm still hopeful. I'm still looking forward to it. What a time to be alive.